I don't have my glass on. All right, guys, welcome to Tiger Talk Thursday. This is episode 29, and we have the amazing Kurt A. David. If you go to Google him, make sure you put the A in. It's very important. If you are new to the series, we have been talking to athletes all over the globe about the transitions that athletes go through when they leave sport due to injury, unforeseen circumstances, or retirement happens that forces them to hang up the jersey. And a brief intro on our guest today. I feel honored to really have him on here because he's really paved the way before I even came on the scene to do this sort of thing. But following life as a professional basketball player, Kurt recreated his successes in education, television, and corporate training. He's authored multiple books on the topic of change and is the creator and host of the Emmy Award winning TV show From the Glory Days that features interviews with Hall of Fame and world champion former professional athletes about their successful transitions into life after pro sports. He's got 4 seasons. You got to check it out. He's the co-founder and chairman of PurposePoint and the Purpose Summit, and the driving force behind Change Like a Champion, which is an educational transmedia platform designed to support businesses and sport professionals in transitioning through life's changes. So the CLAC platform includes books, film, television, workshops, keynote presentations, events, and online learning modules. So in simple terms, Change Like a Champion helps individuals and organizations change on purpose for a purpose. So welcome, Kurt A. David.
Wow, I got to meet that guy. It sounds pretty cool.
His rap sheet is a lot longer than this, but this is where we can make it a nice condensed version, and you get to tell the real and in live person. So let's just dive back to your life as an athlete. Take me back to that household with all those siblings and your amazing parents and what they had to do to get you guys all going.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Janine. It's a pleasure being here, and I can't talk about what I do without talking about who I am, right?
Yeah.
And who I am started very young. The foundation of us was that there was 8 of us in a house, 2 parents and 6 kids, 1 bathroom. I always have to qualify that because you'll learn early on in life with 8 people in one house with 1 bathroom, it's not all about you, right? You'll learn that early on. But seriously, though, my mother was a teacher at a private school and a coach. My dad was the director of social services for the county. So right away, you learn right off the bat, giving back. They were very much into giving back industries. And all 6 of us kids growing up were into sports. I mean, it was great having a mom that was an athletic director and coach at the school because we had a key anytime we wanted it to get to the gym.
Hey, that's true. Get the reps in, right?
Oh, it made a huge difference. With Christmas Day, Thanksgiving, whatever it was, we were in the gym. And all 6 of us kids were on athletic scholarship, and 2 of us played professionally. So imagine that household
That's
growing
crazy.
up. Yeah, no, it was, you understand, being a sports background, but it was very competitive. It was just what we did. I mean, we didn't even think twice about it, and just had an opportunity to play college. And I played overseas in Europe, and my younger brother played overseas in Europe professionally. Basketball was 5 out of the 6 kids. We did have 1 run to the litter. She was only 5'6" tall. And so she ran track at Central Michigan University, but the rest of us were basketball.
And did your parents basketball?
My dad's 6 foot and my mom was 5'8".
Wow.
I guess the joke is the milkman was about 6'10". We're not sure.
Exactly.
But seriously though, yeah, it was just, it was just something that happened. I'm 6'9", 2 meters, 6 centimeters. Brothers 6'7".
How is that possible with your mom and dad? That's crazy. Do you have past aunts and uncles or?
No, just a lot of German blood, I guess it is. That we got that gene. We did it well, and they fed us well and clothed us well. I don't know how they did it growing up, but that was our foundation. So that became the foundation of us, and sports was very important. My parents were at every game that they could make, in high school, college. Obviously, they weren't able to come out of Europe to watch the games, but supported us every time. And so it was always comforting to know that when we were playing or participating in some capacity, our parents were there supporting us, and that was very important to us. It gave us that confidence, gave us the ability to say, hey, you know what? Yeah, we're going to keep moving here. And so, for me, the journey continued that after I was done playing pro basketball in Europe, it was a transition point. I mean, every athlete goes through this, and 100% of professional athletes ultimately lose their job, right? Undeniable fact.
Yeah.
And so when I was done playing, I was kind of bitter. I was angry because it was really premature. I went in for knee surgery, and the orthopedic surgeon said, basically, Kurt, you can keep playing and not walk by the time you're 40, or you can give it up. And so for me, it was a choice of, okay, well, I want to walk by the time I'm 40. So Took some time off, just trying to regroup
How
and
old
figure
were
out.
you at this age?
I was 26, 27 years
Okay.
old about that time. And so, still in the prime, obviously, as an athlete, but, partway through that year, I got tired of being angry and decided I was going to go work on a master's degree and got a master's in counseling. And so that's the direction I left after that. I went into the counseling and worked with kids and worked with counseling parents and kids and did that for over 25 years. But partway through that journey, I had an idea. And that idea was to sit down with other former professional athletes and hear about their life after pro sports. And more importantly, how they recreated their success. And that's what spawned the idea of From Glory Days, the book, where I interviewed 20 former Detroit Pistons, Tigers, Red Wings, and Lions here in Detroit about their life after pro sports. And more importantly, what did they do to recreate that success?
I love that. And I just got chills when you said that. I feel so grateful that one of my, my TEDx talk landed in your hands, because that's how we connected from that. But so I think about people that are going through the transition right now that might be watching this, and we see all the success online. That's the highlight reel, and it's amazing. What did you have to do to get from the angry space to the creative space that led you down that path towards the glory days? Because I know from transitions, I've been through many, divorce, bankruptcy, breast cancer, sports, and they've all had their different ups and downs. But I do find you kind of go back to that like athletic mentality when you get into that group. But for you, behind closed doors, what did you have to do to sink back into that Kurt David that you knew and loved, and that you felt that aliveness like you did when you were on the court?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Janine. I think this could apply to anybody, right? At some point, you get tired of losing. At some point, you get tired of that feeling of losing, and it's like, okay, it's time to start winning again. And I think that's what motivated me. It was like, I got tired of just feeling that way and being down and kind of lost. You lose some identity, you lose about, what am I, who am I? And I think I got tired of that. It motivated me to start seeking again and start moving again and start finding that success. From a competitive standpoint, you can say it's trying to win again. It's trying to find that next championship again, off the field, off the ice, off the court, whatever it might be. But I think more importantly, one of the things that you learn as an athlete is you fall down 7 and you get up 8, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting up and getting back into the ice rink again or getting back on the basketball court, but you're getting up again. And I think that's one of the great traits that you learn from sports. I mean, there's a lot of wonderful traits that we learn from sports, right? Teamwork, the ability to have self-discipline, the grit, learning how to win, learning how to lose. And I think one of the things that started dawning on me was like, I'm tired of losing. It's time to start looking at, how do I win again? What do I need to do to win again?
I love that. And that as soon as you said it, that resonated with me 1,000%. And I think about resiliency has become my kind of motto as I've gone through a lot of ups and downs in my life. And that's one thing that I do have a trust in myself, as you said, fall down 7, get up 8. And I like that. You get tired of losing. I can resonate with that 1,000%. So you go down this path and you start doing the glory days. What would you say were the top 3 out of all 4 seasons that always came up in an interview? What were the top 3 things that when you're talking to all these athletes, it was the most consistent response that you got as they went through those transitions? What do you feel like were kind of the most popular?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've had 50 TV interviews that I've done with, world-class Hall of Fame athletes, all-star athletes. And I think there's a couple things that come glaring with all of them. One, the athletes whose identity is that sport struggled the most. In other words, if that's all they knew was that sport, and then when that transition happened, those are the ones that really had a most difficult time during that transition. As an example, I had a Major League Baseball player that won a World Series, and he talked about all he knew was baseball since 10 years old. Yeah. And at 35, he had to learn how to write a resume, right? He's like, I have no clue. All I've done is baseball since I was 10 years old. Yeah. And now I got to write a resume, and, what's my identity and who am I? And so, that's probably the biggest thing is, and this is a lesson for anybody in transition, right? If your identity is wrapped up into the activity, that's going to be a challenge, because when activity ends or changes, then you lose that identity as a result. So, one of the things I like teaching kids especially is that, hey, this sport is just what you do. It's not who you are. You have to figure out who you are, right? What you stand for, what your values are, what's important to you, right? But this is a sport. This is what you do. And you want to do it to the best of your ability, right? And get to the highest level, you have to hyper focus and be uber confident on that sport, but understanding, hey, this is not who I am. This is just what I do. And I think there's a separate difference. There's an attitude about that will help with
Yeah.
that transition when it happens. But that's the first thing. I think the second thing is what I found is athletes that actually had an education, something to fall back on. They at least had something to refer to. Let's say they had a bachelor's in psychology. Maybe it wasn't something they're going to use, but
Yeah.
at least they had something to refer to say, okay, I got this degree. Boy, where can I go from there with it? It gave them a foundation to move forward from there. The athletes that didn't have any type of degree tend to struggle a little bit more simply because they just didn't have that foundation. Again, not that necessarily that's what they went into after they were done playing, but at least it gave them that foundation.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So identity, education, what was there a third or?
Well, before we get into that, let me get into the stats. Are you familiar with the exit stats?
No, go for it.
So, this is the exit stats as proclaimed by Sports Illustrated many years ago.
Oh, I think I heard you give this in another interview. Yes, please share these. These are great stats.
So first of all, 100% of professional athletes ultimately lose their job, right? Undeniable fact.
Of course. Yeah.
25% of NFL players are broke within the first year out. 25%.
That's crazy.
78% of NFL players within 2 years are broke. 60%, 60 of NBA players are broke within 5 years. And you ready for this one, Janine? There's an 80% divorce rate. So from job loss to disaster, that's the reality for these professional athletes. And so, you take the income loss, you have the relationship loss. And, I have a lot of people that, oh yeah, those athletes are out cheating on their wives or, whatever. And there might be some that do that. But think about this. I don't care how much money you make. If you take a 95% pay cut and go from being on the road 6 months out of the year to all of a sudden you're toe to toe with your spouse every single day with a 95% pay cut.
Yeah.
What relationship's going to survive?
You don't even know. Yeah, no, for sure. And the stressors. What's interesting, I was previously married to an athlete as well. And without even realizing it in my 20s, that was happening. The exact scenario of what we're discussing was happening without realizing it till later.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting that this is kind of coming back around in my 40s. This conversation. That's wild. It makes sense. I believe it.
Yeah, no. And so the goal is to try to educate people, whether it be an athlete or anybody in transition of, okay, well, what do I do? What can I do to head this off? What can I do to prepare for this? Because it's going to happen. As an athlete, it's going to happen, right? At some point, a professional athlete, college athlete, it will happen at some point. And so understanding that, the best coaches are the ones that start planting those seeds. Hey, this is going to be over at some point. What are you doing to prepare?
Well, it's funny. I was talking to another athlete. Sorry, I just cut you off. He was talking about now did you have anyone doing financial planning when you were playing? Because I know one of the NBA guys that I interviewed, he was saying that some of the teams now, they're like, when you sign with your agent, they usually have a financial planner, but he said at the end of the day, you get the final say over your money. So you can't, even though all the resources are there, you necessarily aren't going to, drink from the fountain.
Major League Baseball, when they sign a contract, they have to have a financial advisor on their hip when they sign, right? With Major League Baseball. However, advice is only as good as it is heeded. In other words, it's still my money. I want to buy this watch. I want to buy this car. I want to buy this house. It's still my money, right? And you can give me advice all day long, but it's still my decision. And so, and most people it's instant wealth, right? Especially these days with the contracts. And so most people aren't prepared. They don't have the financial literacy. And so you have athletes that are coming in with all of a sudden wealth. And they have all these people around them that want to be part of that as a result. And who was it? I can't remember which boxer it was. He was spending over $200,000 a month on his entourage, just his entourage, $200,000.
Oh my goodness.
And so, you have that going on as well. And so trying to please people and family but that's the stats. It's just a matter of, how do we change that? How do we help them so when it is over, not that you can necessarily control their money, but at least understand. I mean, the best athletes have always said, I saved. I knew it was going to be over, so I saved. I have agents that say, hey, I'm telling my players to live on 10% and save 90%.
Wow.
Because they have that small window of opportunity in that 3.2 years or whatever the average is for a pro athlete these days. And they say, if you can save as much money as you can in that short period of time, you're going to have a little buffer then when it's over versus spending it all now and then having 10% left over, or if that, trying to live off of it.
That's wild. I never really thought about it like that. But what would you say? I don't know if you can be prepared for that unless teachers or young coach athletes start bringing it in now. But what do you do? Do you start giving finance classes to these athletes? Or, yeah, I mean, because such a small percentage go pro, or when do you introduce that to an athlete to kind of make sure that I mean, everybody needs it. It should be in our schools, no matter what, whether you're an athlete or not. But where do you think the introduction would come in around that? With
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, for me, I stay away from the finances. That's not my expertise. It's not,
Got it.
I'm talking about more of the practical aspects of that transition. So I'll give you a great example. I had a phone call from Houston, Texas years ago from this guy. He says, "Hey, I heard your guy that, works with transition and athletes." I'm like, "Okay, tell me more." He goes, "Well, I just won a medal in the Olympics." And I'm like, "Okay, you got my attention, right?
Yeah.
Congratulations." He says, I'm not sure. He says, I don't know if I want to transition out. I don't know if I want to commit another 4 years. So we started working through the process that I use. And we can talk about that too. It's called my 5 rules of change. So we started walking through that process, and he wasn't sure if he could let go, right? He's like, well, I'm not sure if I can let it go. I don't know if I want to commit another 4 years. So for 6 months, he and I are working back and forth, going through this process. We just couldn't get past the letting go process.
Interesting.
And then finally he said, yeah, okay, I'm going to let it go. I'm not going to commit another 4 years of my life for the Olympics, and I'm going to move forward. And he's done very well since. In contrast to that, I had a phone call from a Major League Baseball player's agent who said, hey, my guy just got released from spring training. He's been a pitcher in the organization, and now he's done. So I sat down with him, and within a week, we started working through this process. And within a week, he literally just let it go. He's like, yeah, I'm done. I'm no longer a pro athlete. And he moved on with his goals and what he want to accomplish next. And so everybody's different, right? But it's a very practical aspect of, when am I done? Because it's so difficult. And in fact, this would be probably a good time to get into my 5 rules, because that's one of them is, how do we let go? What is it that we do to let go?
Yeah.
And that's an important part that I talk with athletes, but also with organizations.
Mm-hmm.
What are the 5 rules of change, so to speak?
Yeah, and I mean, the identity one is for sure number one. I mean, that was a big one for me. It took me going through breast cancer to figure out that I was identifying with all these labels as opposed to really understanding who I was as a person. No, that's powerful. So you go on, you start doing these interviews. Now, we said identity. You talked about the stats. Was there a third one that always came up with the athletes?
Those are probably the main two, and typically the education. They haven't had education. Yeah, that was the other one. But what I discovered, though, from my interviews for the book and then interviews with the athletes, I started seeing a commonality of success, Janine. And what it was is, I have a counseling background, so I look for patterns, right? You're always looking for patterns. And I started seeing a pattern with these athletes that found success again. Some of them have built great businesses, some of them have become politicians, some went into law, someone, they've all found success again. And I started looking at this pattern. I'm like, wow, there's a pattern here that these athletes are doing, and they're 5 things, right? And that's why I call them 5 rules of success for change. And then I started looking at those and saying, wow, these can apply to corporations. These can apply to individuals. These can apply to non-athletes. And so it got me into speaking more. But my 5 rules. So basically, I created an acronym, RULES, and that's what the 5 things are. And each letter stands for something. Each letter means something. And for me, it was simple because I'm like, okay, I got to think of a way to remember these 5 commonalities, right, that these athletes do to find success again. And so that's why I came up with the rules, because I thought, RULES, there's rules of sports, there's rules of life, there's rules everywhere. And so these 5 rules of change kept it simple for me to remember as a result. And so the first letter, you want me to go through these?
Yes, please. I'm like sitting on the edge of my chair waiting for you to share them.
So the first letter, R, stands for refocus. What I've discovered is that every athlete or individual or organization goes through a refocus. Now, the best way to refocus is take a look at current goals and objectives and strategic plans, and to start reevaluating, right? Okay, boy, I went from being a professional hockey player. What's my refocus? Now I'm going to start looking at doing something else, whether it be financial advisor or I'm strategizing that new goal, that new objective. And what I've found by doing that is, especially with athletes, we're very passionate people. And so it helps recreate that passion and purpose again, right? It's so important for us to have that passion and purpose in our life. And by spending time, the first step is spending time to do that soul searching, to refocus. What is my new objective? What is my new goal? It's so easy for athletes, for us to create goals as an athlete. It was very difficult for me afterwards to really think about, boy, what is it I want to do? How do I want to do this? And so spending time and really evaluating, what is my refocus? What is my new goal? What is my new objective? Setting timelines, right? This is my 3rd month goal. This is my 6-month goal. So that refocus is the very, very first step of that 5 rules of change. The next letter, U, stands for use the network, using your network. All of us have a vast network of people around us, right? And so it's a matter of, okay, I have my refocus. I know what my new goals are. Who in my network can I start tapping into to accomplish these goals? Now, I always have to qualify. I'm not talking about using and abusing people. I'm talking about creating win-win relationships, right?
Yeah.
And so as an example, I had a former NHL player that when he was done playing hockey, he said, boy, I got a big, phone list on my phone here. I can just start reaching out to people. He became a financial advisor, and he started tapping into that network right away, saying, hey, guess what? I'm no longer a pro hockey player. Now I'm a financial advisor. I can help you. And they create win-win relationships. So it skyrocketed his business right away by tapping into his network. And so after you refocus, you start using that network that you have of people around you to create those win-win relationships to help you accomplish that refocus. So that's the you. And again, I'm giving you a crib note version. We could spend a half. We could spend
I know you
half
could
a
spend a
day,
whole 6 months on
literally.
these. Yeah.
And so are you, and the next letter is L, which bar none, without a doubt, without a conversation, is the most difficult for athletes. And that's letting go. Letting go. Because it's in the marrow of our bones, never to give up. Right. And so, it's very difficult because it's like, oh man, when do I give up? When do I stop?
I just got chills when you said don't give up. I know I've got that fight inside, hence the nickname Tiger, but letting go.
And there's a time to let go, but there's also a time to use that tenacity to keep moving forward on things, right? And having that wisdom, if you have that clarity of that refocus, it helps understand, okay, boy, this is my new focus, and I have to let go of other things in order to move forward. As an athlete, probably one of the most difficult things to let go of are two things: the championships and the losses. In other words, as an athlete, sometimes we get caught up, hey, I'm a Hall of Famer. I'm a World Series champion. I'm an all-star, right? Well, so what, right? So what? It doesn't matter anymore when you're not an athlete anymore. It's like, it's great. You can have that. I'm an Emmy Award winner. So what? Great. Okay, I won an Emmy, or we won an Emmy for the show. Great. So now what, right? And so letting go of the successes and sometimes the way of thinking too. Sometimes there's a negative way of thinking I have to let go of in order to move forward. Like, oh, I can't do this, or boy, this is going to be hard. I'm a history buff. I love history. And so I always refer to like things like the Roman Empire. And during the Roman Empire, when the Roman generals came home from conquering lands, right, they had these big parades downtown Rome. And as an example, they have these parades, and it's like a Super Bowl parade. They're going through Rome, they're getting all these accolades. And it's written in history. You can read this. As the Roman generals are going down the street, getting all these accolades after coming home from conquering this land, they have somebody on their chariot chirping in their ear the whole time saying, all glory is fleeting. All glory is fleeting. In other words, so what?
Yeah.
What's
Don't
next?
get caught up in your successes.
Exactly.
And it's so easy to ride the coattail of something for like 6 months. And you're like, okay, stay in action. We got to be consistent here. Ride the momentum.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not against, staying relevant. We all have to continue to work to stay relevant, so to speak. But, letting go, sometimes it's letting go of those championships, those titles. Sometimes it's letting go of way of thinking, right? But letting go, I found the athletes that really let go are the ones that move forward. I gave you this example of the Olympic athlete versus the baseball player, right? The sooner you let go, the swifter that transition can happen as a result. And so that's the L. The E stands for execute your plan. In other words, what I've discovered is you might have that refocus and that new strategic plan and new goals, but rarely in transition is it one and done. Rarely do we okay, this is it. This is the course. Boom, I hit it on, right off the bat. Typically it takes some adjustment. It takes some time. You start executing your plan and realize, oh, I have to adjust here. This isn't what I thought it was. I got to adjust over here. And so continuing to execute that plan. This is where the grit comes in. This is where the work comes in.
Yeah.
Transition and change is not easy. It's very difficult. In fact, it's very uncomfortable. And sometimes we have to work through that. And that's where executing it is really important, that understanding that this is where the work comes in. It's not just going to show up. We have to work. We have to do what it is. And so, I can go deeper into that, but it's called executing your plan. In other words, you continue to work through that refocus and adjust as needed. So RULE, and the final letter stands for someone. What I've discovered, Janine, is that people that go through a transition, especially athletes, found a mentor, so to speak, one person that they're able to attach to really say, hey, this is where I want to be. Help me get there. Help me pick your brain. A great example of that, I have a friend that played in the NBA for 8 years. And during that time, he always was enamored by television, right? He just loved television. And so during the off season, when he was home on the road, he would also go into one of the local TV studios and just hang out with one of the TV guys and said, "Hey, I just want to watch what you do. I just want to
That's
hang out and
awesome.
watch you." And so he had this mentor for all those years. And as a result, this buddy of mine by the name of Greg Kelser has been doing NBA broadcasts for 35 years now. And so
Yeah.
he had a mentor that helped him early on and just helped him. And, you know, I could tell you story after story about that. But those are
Oh,
the
I'm sure.
five rules of change. RULES. Refocus, use your network, let go, execute your plan, and someone or find a mentor. So by doing those things, that helps accelerate that
Yeah.
transition that people go through as a result.
Well, that made me think of, is it Denzel Washington who said hang around the barbershop long enough, eventually get a haircut? But so that's what I love, that piece of advice. And if anybody is kind of struggling too with what am I supposed to do? I talk about saying yes to new experiences all the time, because it might open a door that you didn't even know. There's one thing to be passionate, but then we have these God-given gifts, and it's like your passion and gifts could be slightly different. But I love that. Rules, five reasons for change, 5 rules for change,
Five
reasons.
rules for change.
Yeah,
Yeah,
5 rules for
exactly.
change. And so how does one, now obviously you've got a long list of successes. You're an author, Emmy Award winner. You got to just, I can't not ask you about that experience having you on here. Tell us about what it was like to, do you get a call and say you've been nominated? Do you know before? Maybe you're not allowed to just tell us that, but
No, it's been
what a
an
great
interesting.
experience.
Well, I have to say this because, you know, for the TV world, I had zero. I mean, and when I would say zero, I mean zero TV production experience.
Yeah.
You know, I have an elementary education degree, right? Teaching elementary kids. I have a coaching, you know, I coached, and I have a counseling degree. And so when it came to this TV show, I'm like, man, I got to surround myself with some people that know what they're doing, because I don't, right?
Yeah.
And so it's just a matter of building a team. So that over the course of you know, the first 2 seasons, then a third season, and in the fourth season, we're like, okay, boy, I think we got this. You know, production's looking good. We got some good interviews. And so we got nominated for my interview with Rocky Bleier out of Pittsburgh. So Rocky Bleier is a 4-time Super Bowl champion, war hero. He has an amazing story. I mean, just the story itself is amazing, but it was well produced by the director, Michael Stern, who was our director for that. And then we got the information that, okay, you're nominated. The show got nominated. I'm like, okay, great. So we go to this Emmy Award event. And one of the things they tell you is before your category, come down to the side of the stage, because you don't know if you're is the winner or not. So, you know, the people that are nominated for that category, which our category was interview show, right? So this is a nomination for best interview show. So we're on the side of the stage, and, you know, the other people there that got nominated as well, and they're announcing the category in front of us. So there's a category right in front of us, and I'm hearing them announce the nominations, but then I hear them announce the winner of that category right before us. And I looked at one of the producers that was there with me, and I says, uh-oh, the one that just won that category is in our category too. So I'm like, oh no, they must be really good, and they're probably going
Oh
to win it then,
no.
you know. So I'm standing on the side of the stage with our producer and our director, and I hear that, you know, other show get announced. I'm like, oh, okay, they're in our category, they're probably going to win it. So all of a sudden they go through the list of nominees for our category, and the winner is From Glory Days. And so we're like, woo, you know, we won it. And it's funny because we have a video of it from our wives up in the balcony, and they're screaming the whole
I
time, right?
think
They're
I've
just,
seen it. They're in the top,
yeah,
and
yep,
I've seen
exactly.
it,
They're up
and
in
it's
the
kind of
balcony.
wobbly.
Yep,
I
exactly.
have seen it.
They're filming it from their phones, and the wives are up there screaming, and we give our little speech and go off stage. And so, yeah, it was, you know, to me, an award is simply an acknowledgement of doing something good, right? That's what it is. And to
Yeah.
me, it's not, it's the team, right? You can't build a great, there's nothing great accomplished without a team, right? And so for me, it's not just, you know, it's my idea, it was my creation, but it was a team that got us there, and we hope to continue to get there, right? You know, we're
Well,
not happy with just one. Let's win another one. You know, let's get some more hardware, right? You know, and so that's
of
kind of the
course.
goal.
And I think what's really neat is what just came up for me as you were saying that, as athletes, we crave that team dynamic.
Oh,
So
100%.
finding a space that does give you that team atmosphere, obviously, it's hard to be the Lone Ranger when you're someone who's used to being a part of a team of some sort. So, and you can see it like rekindles that fire inside, right? Of that, you're competing, maybe not in the physical level, but now that must have been more of like a mental competition in your
Yeah,
mind because
huge.
you're
Yeah.
doing the interviews.
Well, even more importantly, it's pulling the right talent together, right? Because I'm kind of like the coach now. I mean, it's my creation. I'm executive producer. I'm the host, and it's like, boy, how do I pull this? And then let me share a little vulnerability with you right now. I mean,
Yeah,
I
please
used to
do.
think I was a bag of chips and then some, so to speak, right? It's like, okay, I'm this performer, right? This is great.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how bad of a leader I was
Oh,
until I became an executive producer of the show that I created. And I
interesting.
realized, yeah, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I'm a performer, right? And performer, who's a performer about?
Themselves.
Themselves, right?
Yeah.
And who's a real leader about?
Everybody
The
else.
team. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it really, that was my aha moment to realize, oh my goodness, man, yeah, I've done great as far as a performer, but I need to start focusing on how do I build a team and how do I encourage a team and pull. And I'm still learning, right? It's still a struggle, and it's just a matter of
What was the
continuing to.
moment that you kind of had that, like, what were you doing? What happened that made you kind of trigger that?
Yeah, I think failure, right? You look at stuff and it's like, oh, this isn't working. And it's like an aha moment, like, why isn't it working? Oh, okay, well, Kurt, you're not a very good leader, right? You got to do a little bit
Mm,
better. And it really, for me, one of the things is with television, it's all about funding a project. It's all about distribution of the project, and then creating the best project you can create, right, with a production standpoint. And so during that funding part of it, during the distribution part of it, that's the most difficult aspect of
yeah.
creation of a project. And so I just kept getting frustrated. I'm like, well, why is that? I'm like, oh, well, I need to get better at coaching people, or better at finding people that do this better. And so, that was the aha moment for me. But I think that, it's I think the biggest thing, kind of like you were just curious. You always want to learn. You always want to get better. And
Yeah.
so having that attitude of, okay, we're not there. We got to keep moving forward. And how do we keep moving forward? And, the hard part is when you work with other people, you work with other people, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. And they
it,
don't have the same passion or drive or discipline or whatever as you do,
well, I mean,
or
I could set a goal and accomplish it all day long, but all of a
yeah.
sudden you got to pull in other people that is part of that. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, how do I, it's better to lead 1,000 people 1 foot than one person go 1,000 foot. And I was that person going 1,000 feet, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, it's like, oh, where'd everybody go, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and so it's better, and that's what a true leader does. They lead that 1,000 people 1 feet versus the one person going 1,000 foot.
Well, and I love this topic of leadership because I do a lot of coaching on self-leadership and self-reliance. So if to anyone watching, what would you say for if it was obviously in order to lead a team without sounding cliche, you need to lead yourself, but if they are not connected with that person, that athlete of who they've been, what would be what's the first activity that you would tell them to do if they were just stuck in a dark place, unable to recognize where they are? What would you recommend that they do for themselves? What one action could they
The
take
first
right
thing
away?
is an attitude that things can change.
Yeah.
You can change, I can change, things can change. Change happens, and that's, I think that's the very first thing, is understanding that
Yeah.
we're not stuck. We're only stuck because we want to be stuck, right?
This is
But
true.
change can happen, and that's the very first attitude to have, is that, hey, change is going to happen internally, externally. I always tell people the best leaders are not the ones that are simply on the front wave of that change. They're causing that wave of change. And so
Mm,
always thinking about, how can I change? How can I help my team change? What is it that we need to change, right? Not that we want to have a flavor of the week, right? Every week changing something, but yeah, I think you understand what I mean by that.
yeah.
Understanding that we have the power to change, we have the control to change. Sometimes circumstances cause us to change, right? If you have an injury and you're done playing pro sports,
Yeah.
but you still have control of that change, right? Of what you do from there.
And that's usually the biggest, like when athletes have that immediate injury, I find that's when they go through the mindset shift is the hardest to grasp because they haven't had the time to be like, okay, I'm not performing like I used to. Maybe I should think about an exit strategy. It's unexpected, right? And that's kind of the
Mm-hmm.
hardest change. Would you agree with your work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's just, especially when it's sudden like that for anybody, right?
Yeah.
I deal with the military as well. Military experiencing the same thing. In military, when they have a sudden change, they go from inside the locker room, so to speak, all of a sudden outside. They
Yeah.
go from the support system, all of a sudden they're on their own. You're on a
Yeah.
schedule, all of a sudden you're not on a schedule anymore. And so, yeah, it can be very challenging, but change happens, right? And that's the biggest thing, is understanding that, hey, change is going to happen. It's going to happen at some point. And how am I handling that when it does happen? What are the things that I can do to prepare for it? But more importantly, when it does happen, how can I understand that I'm going to take the most advantage that I can of the change that is happening and make the most out of it?
Yeah. I love that. So many good nuggets on here. Is there, I mean, you've been in this arena longer than I have, and I'm so grateful that Doug connected us and to learn and grow from you. And it's funny, when you start something too, you think you're like in your own lane and you're like, somebody did this before. I remember when I was like trying to look up books and I was like, oh my gosh, there's like 20 different books out there. What would be your advice? Like if there's one last piece of, maybe I didn't ask the question that you think is very important to share with athletes. You know, I really think about, for me, the reason why I wanted to start this, we had two friends that they were found in their apartments. They had passed away. They couldn't get over the identity crisis. They couldn't get past different things. And it was like, man, I think about how much I feel like the pride part with an athlete and suffering in silence was a big one, because you're so used to being in the limelight. You're so used to being the performer, or for me, it was always I was a really great individual performer. And then I had to step back. And that rush, right? And I love that. And I could easily, now as a mom of 3, my husband has to be like, Janine, you can't just, when you have a goal, you can't just forget about all of us. That's a common like
you're moving at 1,000 feet, and you know, they're the
what's
one
for dinner?
Well, I think, you brought up Doug, and I want to mention Doug Smith, because I think, Doug Smith out of Ottawa has such an amazing story. We've had him on twice in 2 different seasons, his story.
He's phenomenal.
And I think, for those people that may not know Doug's story, he number 2 draft pick in the NHL, went to the LA Kings from Ottawa, Canada. He said it was like a free fall, right? Went from 19 years old, all of a sudden living in LA, condo on the beach, driving a Porsche, money in his pocket. It was like the absolute free fall. But then he moved forward, and he had a horrific accident where he went headfirst into the boards during a game, and literally went from being a pro athlete to nothing from the neck on down, right? And he talks about that journey and how despondent he was. But during that journey, what was exciting to hear was his wife got in his face and said, hey, listen, I can't imagine what you're experiencing, but I love you. I have 2 beautiful daughters that love you. And Doug said that was the seminal moment that shifted his attitude, right? And they started doing more research about his spinal cord injury and what was going on. And ultimately they found out his spinal cord was still intact, which was huge, right? And his paralysis came from all different components for the shattering and trauma. But Doug now, he's walking, he's skating, he's a motivational
he walked through my front door, and I was like, how is this possible?
Yeah, no, it's an amazing story. But the reason why I bring that up is his best soundbite, and I'm going to paraphrase it from the TV show, was, he talked about how being an athlete, our goal is to be the best in the world, right? We want to be the best in the world, right? I just striving. But then he said after his accident, his whole attitude changed, and he realized that now he wants to be the best for the world. And asking for help is a big part of that. The awareness, asking for help. And I think that's the biggest advice that, from Doug's story as well as others, that, asking for help, going from trying to be the best in the world, why don't you try to be the best for the world? Because that's a whole different shift, and you're going to have a whole different impact as a result, athlete or not.
Yeah, the ripple effect is profound. And that was my big shift. I even mentioned it in my TED Talk. I go, for as long as I knew I wanted to change the world, but instead the world changed me. And having gone through those hardships, sitting back, having to reflect. And actually, I wanted to ask you about this. Like, I don't know, I love to journal and meditate, and for me to deepen that connection to self. Do you do anything behind closed doors? Do you have a routine like that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I have a Bible devotion I read every morning and pray every morning. I just started a list of things I hate and things I love. No, seriously, I started that list. I'm like, okay, whatever do I hate? I hate cutting grass. All right, I don't like doing that. I love doing this. And so what it does is it helps me frame in, boy, what do I want to spend my time? What do I want to do? I love spending time with my kids and playing with my kids. Okay, well, what are my sacrifices? And, what am I changing as a result? And so, yeah, I think one of the things that I've learned, because it's so easy in athlete, we're all over the place, right? We tend to have all sorts of thoughts and, ADHD, OCD, whatever you want to call us.
Right? Are you labeling me as we have this?
I'm not diagnosing. No, I'm not diagnosing whatsoever. But, and so looking at what is it that I'm focused on? What is it that I want to hyper focus on and uber confident on? And so those are the things, because think about it, to get to the highest level, you have to be hyper focused, you have to be uber confident. And I'm not talking about overconfident. I'm talking about just that solid confidence from putting the work in and knowing that, boy, you know what, I've earned this. I've worked hard, and it's starting to come together. I once heard somebody, I think his name's Ed Milet, he's got a podcast. He's got something called compound pounding, right? It's kind of like compound interest.
Yeah.
Only it's compound pounding that I put into work. I keep putting into work, and eventually that compound interest pays off from the work, so to speak. It's called compound pounding. I love that term. And
Well,
so,
the hyperfocus thing, I just went like this because that's something that I've recognized in myself. I'm amazing at hyperfocusing on give me a spurt and I'll go balls to the wall.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm,
then I have the fallout.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then it's like I need that new goal to figure out. So what I've been working on is more consistency as opposed to, I don't know what your take is on that, but the hyper focus one is something that I recognize. And that's interesting. So you found that with all the athletes that you've interviewed, that's common.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, finding that focus. Well, and my wife puts it best. She goes, "Why are you so intense? Why are you always so intense?" And I'm like, "Honey, I'm not intense. I'm just hyper focused, right? I mean, literally, that's what it is." And so
My husband's going to get that one now because I get the intense comment too.
there you go.
I love it.
But
Well,
one of the things I want to share too is before we
yeah,
leave is,
please.
people always ask, what was your best interview? What was your favorite interview? I've done 50 TV interviews from Ray Lewis to local people here in Detroit. And we mentioned Doug Smith. I think, for me, the stories that always resonate the best are the ones that they have this great accomplishment, Super Bowl championship. But they have something that is an underlying that most people don't know about. I'll give you a great example. I interviewed somebody that most people don't recognize. His name's Charlie Batch. Charlie Batch is from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He had one scholarship offer, went to Eastern Michigan University. His junior year in college, he literally got a call from his mom back in Pittsburgh, said, "You got to come home." And said, "Mom, I'm right in the middle of school, right in the middle of football workouts. Nope, you got to come home." "Mom, what's going on?" "Your 17-year-old sister was just murdered by a drive-by shooting."
Oh,
So told his football coaches at Eastern Michigan University, "Hey, I got to go home, help bury my sister. I'm not sure if I'm coming back." Right? They were like, "Do whatever you got to do." So he went home, buried his sister. Mom's like, "Nope, go back to school, finish your school, finish your football." Came back and broke every record at Eastern Michigan University as a quarterback, drafted in the NFL, traded to
wow.
Pittsburgh, won 2 Super Bowls in Pittsburgh. But this is why I tell this story, is because Charlie now has a foundation, inner city Pittsburgh, that he's pulling kids off the street through sports and education. And he said, if I can save one child in honor of my sister, that's what it's all about. So those are the kind
Mm,
of stories we want to get out, right? We want to talk
yeah,
about the glory days. We want to talk about that transition, but we want to talk about, boy, what are you doing to recreate your success, to recreate your significance? So it's stories like that we want to get out there to help people understand that, this is more than just an education or more than just an entertainment about an athlete.
of
This is
course.
something bigger than that. And those are the stories that we want to tell.
I love that. And that's super special. That means a lot to me because I think about so many phenomenal athletes that I know are struggling in silence and they have so many gifts that they can bring to the world. And if they can follow your 5 rules and begin to let go and create that space to create something new, it's like the gift you can give back that keeps on giving. So
Absolutely.
I love it. You're a huge inspiration to me as what you've created with the Glory Days, as an athlete, as a speaker. So it means so much to me that to have you on as a guest. I can't believe it's episode 29. Just started these in May. And for you to be here, going through what you're going through with your own personal family, it means a lot about how you show up to give back to the world. So thank you so much. Kurt A. David, everyone. Tiger Talk Thursday, transitioning to life after sports. Such an honor and such a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, Janine. Thank you for what you do as well.